This is All the Rage with Paige. I'm Paige, and today we're going to be talking about cycles. And just to start right off the bat, I noticed that the past few episodes, I just have not been fully into the podcast, and I hate to admit that because it's we're just starting, so how could I already be bored? And that doesn't really sound very promising for the future. But I think that it's just a cycle of me, just a cycle that seems to come up whenever I feel like I've succeeded in some sort of goal, and then that feeling just kind of dies off a bit, and I lose motivation, and suddenly other things just seem a little bit more alluring and a little bit more exciting for me, because I haven't really dove into it yet. So yeah, I seem to get in this cycle of getting kind of bored and giving up on things that I'm just starting to feel like I'm accomplishing and doing and making moves on. Because yeah, I don't know, fear creeps up. I think that's really what it is. It's not exactly the boredom. It's like me psyching myself out and thinking oh, this isn't going to be what I thought it was, or I suddenly start to change my mind. And it's not to say that having those check-ins with yourself aren't good, because it's actually great. It might actually avoid that cycle of boredom or giving up on something you just started. But sometimes it can go too far, and it can end up coming to that point where we just end up giving up on everything that we're feeling passionate about and actually try to pursue. So I did look up how long it takes to form a habit, and it's over 2 months. So really, I need to have at least 8 of these episodes under my belt to even feel like I'm getting in the groove of it. So I do think what's happening right now is, yeah, me just kind of in that mode of, what do I want out of this? Do I want anything out of it? Is it simply just for fun? Is it for me to get that goal of consistency that I had for this year? And the thing is with hobbies, sometimes it is going to not sound super exciting. Even though it's not work, it doesn't mean it's going to be fun the whole time. And I think that that's part of why a lot of us don't even have hobbies, is because it's hard to learn. The struggles, especially in the beginning, are tough. But the thing is I don't think you ever really stop learning in hobbies. You're going to continue to have those bumps along the road. There's going to be challenging, projects, or you're going to be struggling mentally. So it's just going to be harder to tap into your creativity. It also made me think about this thing that I do, this hobby rotation. And I've kind of been thinking of my hobbies as almost seasonal in a way. And I've heard other people actually in my life talk about this as well with theirs too. So I know I'm not alone in this sort of thing. And I think it is valuable to look at your hobbies and be okay, well, when are these the most beneficial for me? My indoor hobbies versus outdoor hobbies, or weekly hobbies versus hobbies that I do a few months out of the year, and things like that. And I think that's helpful because, for example, I do still consider myself a trail runner, or a runner in general. And sometimes I get imposter syndrome about that feeling, because I actually haven't run in I think years now. But I think when it comes to hobbies, it's it's more about what your passions are. What are the things that you think about and hold to your heart dearly? I'm kind of torn on how I feel about labels and identifiers and things like that, because I do think that sometimes we can get stuck on things like that, or be critical or judgmental of others when it comes to having certain labels on people, if you get what I'm saying. But I do think when it comes to things like hobbies and interests, it is really nice to have those concrete feelings in your mind, because with my example of being a runner, or even making music, if you stop a hobby for a while, it doesn't mean that you can't go back to it someday, because sometimes you can't do those hobbies. Like the reason I haven't really been running is because the way that I like to run is by myself, and with 2 kids and us making the choice to not really get help when it comes to the care of our kids, it makes the hobby of running, on your own significantly harder. So it's not something that I want to have looming over my head and like guilty about that I'm not doing this thing anymore. I also think that we can put too much pressure on ourselves when it comes to these self-identifiers of, we don't view ourselves as like, let's say a weightlifter if we are just starting on that journey. And I think that that kind of holds us back, because we get stuck in this place of not believing in ourselves ever becoming that thing. Like, it's like we have to prove to ourselves that we can be that thing. Even when we're doing it, we can't like tell ourselves that we're doing it. Like, it's weird that I, even to this day, have a hard time saying to people that I'm a runner. Like, I feel like I don't deserve it or something, which is so weird because I used to run every single day. But I do think that, yeah, that feeling of like, of not wanting to say that we're something just because we're not doing it enough, or we're not at the level that we want to be someday, does hold us back from becoming that thing, because it separates ourselves so far from it. And I think it also takes away the compassion when we don't have the capacity to do all of the things that we want to do. Being able to view ourselves as doing the thing as soon as we start doing it, is so freeing, because yeah, it not only takes so much of the pressure off, but it helps us give ourselves compassion when we fall off for a day or two, or even a few weeks, or even a few months or a year. And it's going to be that much easier to come back to it, or make a game plan of how we're going to get back to it. I mentioned hormonal cycles, and I hate that it's such a, I feel like it is still kind of like a taboo topic. It's weird that I'm almost 30 and I'm like, do people want to hear about this? But I think it's very relevant. And I think I've been tracking my cycle for like 5 years at this point. And I mean, it took me up until a few months ago to actually understand how much my cycle affects my life. And I think it is because there are these stereotypes of like not being allowed to use your period as an excuse to not work, or, not do anything really, or it's a embarrassing thing to admit how emotional you are, while you're PMSing. And so I just never really took it seriously, or thought it meant that much. And oh boy, does it. It's funny because it was actually a TikTok, I think, that made me think about it more, because someone was talking about how if women were in charge of the work routine schedule, it would be based on monthly cycles versus daily cycles, because men have a 24-hour hormonal cycle and women have the monthly hormonal cycle. So their example was like the most hard and productive parts of the job would be done 1 week of the month. Like, we're getting all this like big important stuff done this week of the month, and then we're getting all of the busy work and things on the weeks that were less productive and things like that, just for an example. So I kind of thought to myself, like, that actually makes a lot of sense, because I have noticed this pattern of like, I feel so amazing that week of ovulation, and then the week of PMSing, I mean, I'm bloated. I am suddenly getting acne. My hair is just not falling the same. And I'm, more emotional. I'm feisty. Like, it's embarrassing how spot on it is. And maybe that's why we don't talk about it, because we just feel like a cliche, like a stereotype. If we're honest with ourselves about it and use it to our advantage. Like, I do not need to feel so much shame for how lazy I feel. This is natural for me. My body is telling me to rest. I think it makes so much sense to like plan things around your hormonal cycle. All of my more like quiet to-dos on my list, those need to be done during my less active weeks of the month. And the couple of weeks where I'm feeling a lot better mentally, that's when I need to be doing the things that take up a lot more energy and lightness in my mind. And narrowing it down, like I'm going to do most of my reading during my PMS and menstrual week. And I'm going to be doing a lot more of planning around the podcast or working out or going on runs, things like that, more so during the couple of weeks where I'm really feeling good. I'm going to be initiating and accepting sex most days during those couple of weeks where I'm feeling great. Because like, for example, I was adding so many things to my daily life to like try to keep myself emotionally regulated and checking in with myself that it became a little bit like, it was almost like I was just adding more to my plate, which I didn't used to feel because it was all like little things that I could do really quickly. But the more that I added to the day, obviously that's taking up more of my time. So instead, I'm changing things to like, I'm going to be doing more of those things during those slower weeks, the weeks that I need them. And then I'm going to still do some of them during the other weeks, but not as much because I'm using more of my time getting stuff done and feeling great. So I've mentioned I'm getting more into astrology, and it's helped me come across moon cycles. And I've always loved the moon. I love looking at the moon, but I never really learned much about the moon cycles. And I still don't really know that much. It still kind of confuses me. But something I found so fascinating was I learned that our menstrual cycles, ladies, our menstrual cycles are actually syncing up with either the new moon or the full moon. I was like, really? Because I have been tracking it for 5 years and I'm about to find out right now. And sure enough, every single period after having my son was always the days leading up to the full moon. And then every single period since having my daughter, it's been a few days after the new moon. The full moon represents releasing and letting go. The days before is a time of releasing and letting go. It literally said that like the days leading up to the full moon, which is when they say menstrual cycles typically start. It's a time for releasing and letting go. And I do feel like that was the space I was in postpartum after my first. And then every single period after having my second, I was having it a few days after the new moon. And apparently it is the start of new beginnings. And that it's a good time to start intentions after a new moon. So yeah, just like, I do think if we notice the patterns in ourselves, we're more conscious of like, where did that come from? And is that where I want to keep going? I think there's good and bad cycles. So I think it's really good to just kind of like, yeah, check in with ourselves. I don't know how often. I mean, I guess it could be really quick, really, if we're just thinking about it every day of like, how is each thing that I'm doing in my life going? What are the things that you are just doing mindlessly all the time that might be actually holding you back? Even if it comes to, yeah, a thing or a person or a place. What are the things that you miss that you used to do and kind of dropped off on? Or what are the things that you want to do and you're making excuses of why you can't? Is there a way that you could actually do it just a little bit? is there a way that you could adjust the things that you're doing seasonally, weekly, in order to do more of the things that you really want to do? When you notice bad cycles in others, 50% of you said that you notice it and lend compassion, and 36% of you said that you notice the noticing and reflect on yourself. I definitely fall along the lines of noticing my noticing and reflecting on myself. I do think sometimes I definitely talk about it with, like, either my husband or a friend. But I don't know, that kind of rarely happens anymore. I think the less that I have been involved in conversations like that with other people, I'm doing it far less. So I think that is one of the things where you might notice a cycle of different ways that you react to things based on who you are involved with in your daily life. Like, is there going to be conversations that bring up those cycles in you? Like, I think sometimes the reactions that we have can be based on other cycles outside of it. Like, if we have this cycle of projecting or gossiping and things like that, is there other cycles that we have that are encouraging that cycle or behavior? Because maybe the reason it's so hard not to gossip is because we have a friend that gossips with us all the time, and it's really tempting for us to, fall back into that cycle. Same with, like, eating bad foods. Like, is there somebody that we are, like, do I have somebody who enables me to do that behavior on a regular basis, and that's why it's been extra hard for me to fall out of that cycle? Things like that. And there's probably endless examples of this, but I think you guys probably get what I'm saying. I asked what you do when you notice bad cycles in yourself, and 57% of you said that it's trial and error with compassion, and 21% of you said that you stay in your comfort zone or find a quick fix. I think the other options were, like, you seek outside advice, or you blame outside factors or yourself. And I mean, yeah, we probably all do kind of like a mix of all these things. And I definitely think that going about it with the trial and error, leading with compassion, is probably the best way to go, because I do feel like the quick fix, blaming outside people or even seeking answers from outside people, is, again, that thing of, like, not going to the source of the problem, which is, always ourselves. Obviously there's outside factors usually that influenced ourselves, but we are the only people that can really get ourselves out of those cycles, or really being able to comfort and understand ourselves in a way that's going to be impactful enough for us to change. Because yeah, if we're putting all of it on anything else besides ourselves, it makes sense that that's just never going to be enough. Because if we don't think that we're deserving of it, or that we're not capable, or that we're not safe enough to be able to accomplish these things, then it's just never going to happen. So I think trial and error with the compassion is, like, the only way that anything is ever going to change. I say trial and error because, like, we're going to make mistakes in anything, and we're going to suck in the beginning. And not only that, but like I said in the beginning, is anytime we're learning something new, and that includes learning about ourselves or learning about the emotional regulating, all the tiny little behaviors or negative thought streams that we've developed over time, all of those little things, learning how to stop those things, or learning new ways of doing things and thinking, we're going to suck at it for a while. And once we get used to it, there's still going to be reasons that it gets hard again. We're going to have to circle back once in a while. I feel like that's kind of a theme with a lot of this is like, you know, the planets, they're moving around in circles, right? We're technically moving around in circles. We do seem to think a lot of things in like just the starting point and the ending point. So many things are more in the lines of like a circle, a cycle. Like it's never ending. And I think that having that sort of view on it will hopefully be like really helpful for us to stay on track, because we're not going backwards. We're just going around. We're just taking a little deep tour. We're just going around and around, and we're always going to come back to ourselves. So I think what my plan moving forward, I mean, I think this is going to take a long time. I'm probably going to start out in. So I'm going to start thinking about what hobbies seasonally do I want to focus on. Start there. And then maybe go monthly, weekly. I don't know. I haven't obviously nailed this down quite yet. I'm going to keep tracking my menstrual cycle with the moon cycle. I'm going to start learning a little bit more about the astrology planet situation, as well as what these moon cycles mean and how I can, use that to my advantage, right? And then same with the menstrual cycle, thinking of that with the tasks that I seem to have weekly, monthly, things like that, and try to start planning things out, like writing it down so I can get in the habit. Because if it takes over 2 months for a new behavior, I feel like when it comes to something like this, where you're spreading things out more, it's going to make it take a lot longer for it to really become a habit. So I think planning things out, writing them down, is going to be great. And even just the process of writing it down when you're thinking about it, I think is really going to help. I mean, for me, I know that I have a lot better of a time retaining information if I'm writing things down, especially several times. So I think even getting in the habit of putting it on, like I have a monthly whiteboard that I use, doing the habitual habit of doing that monthly and having that visual and looking at it every day. I think all of those things are only going to help me to keep these cycles going. So with all my like little hobbies or the little things I do for my self-care, things like that, I don't know how I'm going to specifically start planning those things out, but I think I will start to write things down in a smaller journal, maybe even planning out my day. I think I'm even going to get to the point where I like have certain days that I read, certain days that I just chat with Charlie, certain days that like I have a certain time of the weekend that I usually have my me time. And so I might plan out certain things, obviously with that allotted time. And then I do my podcast a certain night of the week. And I think, I think when it comes to routines, I think we get stuck in this idea that it's like Groundhog's Day. But I think we get stuck in Groundhog's Day when we don't have a plan or a vision of how we want to go about things coming up. But I also want to express that this isn't a thing of like just fully planning out your life. I think it's good to manifest what you want, have a clear vision and plan of what you desire and things like that. But doing these things, we still do need to be flexible because life happens and things happen. But I think when we have plans like this, it's a lot more easier to move things around versus when we don't have tools like this. I think a lot of us just like drop off on things altogether and then we're just right back at ground zero. But if we already have some sort of plan in place, we can adjust things and it might not feel as catastrophic, I guess, when one part of it changes. I'm very excited to see if I feel a major difference as far as how much more I can get done, not simply because I'm like being like type A and like writing all these things down all the time, but more because of just being, again, more like conscientious of these things, thinking about these things more, and really just like leading my life with what is going to work best for me and when. Because again, like, I mean, I'm planning out times where I'm going to be relaxing more, where I'm going to consciously decide that these days I'm not going to be doing too much because I've already got that covered during this time. This is scheduled me time, alone time, the time that I'm going to be doing hobbies, and not having all the other things looming over my head while I do it. And then when it comes to the luxuries, like for example, the tea, or even my weekly time that I go thrifting, I think when it becomes part of the plan, a lot of that guilt can kind of go away a bit because I planned for this. This is what my expectation was. I'm doing this for me, and this is benefiting my life. I think we get a lot of guilt when we do the things that we want because it feels like we're taking away from something else. But if it's a part of the expectation and it's a part of what you consider to be your future, I think that there's going to be a lot more compassion for yourself. Like, not only are you allowing yourself to do it, but you're going to be actually like fully in it and appreciating it and probably getting a lot more out of it, really. Every single time I end the podcast, I feel like I'm just like editing it out of the blue because I'm so tired and I don't know what else to say, but that's happening again. It's the cycle. So I probably need to plan on starting this podcast a little bit earlier when I do it. So there we go. And that's part of it too, is like when you're leading with like this thought process of cycles and things like that, I feel a lot less bad when I'm noticing these things because I'm just like, all right, well, what do I need to change? I need to do it earlier. Duh. Instead of finding myself in this place again and again and again and just getting irritated with myself and shaming myself for it. And on that note, I love you guys and I'll see you next week. All right, bye.